This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
At age 36, he became the Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives, one of the youngest ever. If he gets his way, his next stop will be the United States Senate. Marco Rubio on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Conversations. We are pleased to welcome Marco Rubio. Thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
It wasn't that long ago that you were considered not having all that great of a chance of beating the popular Governor Charlie Crist in a Republican nomination for United States Senate. All of a sudden, that has changed. Why?
Well, first of all, I think the premise was wrong. First of all, thanks for having me.
Well, our pleasure.
The premise was wrong. I think this notion and belief that anyone in politics cannot be beat is wrong. We're all of us who aspire to office are subject to voters, and that decision is not going to be made for months. Now, here's the truth. I think there's a real belief out there that America's headed in the wrong direction. In essence, that the way the leadership of this country, at the presidential level, at the congressional level, would take us is wrong. And people are looking for voices that are going to go to Washington, D.C. and not just stand up against that, but offer an alternative. And the bottom line is that there's no one else running for United States Senate except me who will do that. I'm the only candidate for U.S. Senate that will go to Washington, D.C. and stand up against Barack Obama, stand up against the Congress and the direction they would take our country, and in fact offer a clear alternative direction, one that's truer to our promise and to our heritage.
You know, most folks would consider Charlie Crist a conservative, and I've seen you being called an ultra-conservative, so to speak. Is there a move going on right now that people are starting to drift more to the conservative side of things as opposed to that moderate Republican?
No, I think that the vast majority, the mainstream of America is in that center-right place, that place that most people would term conservative. Gallup said that the other day, and then their poll found 40% of Americans consider themselves to be conservatives and another 20-some-odd% moderate to conservative. So that's, the mainstream of American thought says we shouldn't spend money we don't have. Government shouldn't pick the winners and losers in our economy. Government and the relationship between government and our lives shouldn't be radically redefined. That's where the mainstream of American thought is. Anything but that, I think, is outside the mainstream. I think that's where the radical left finds itself. And so, I believe that what political pundits call conservatism is in fact the mainstream belief of most Americans.
Do you think there's starting to be a separation between the true conservatives and the Republican Party right now?
No, the Republican Party is an organization. It's a political organization, and I believe it is the logical home, the natural home of conservative center-right Americans. I don't think it's inevitable. In essence, I don't think that it happens on its own. We have to go out and earn that. But I think that's where that movement belongs. It's where that movement's been most successful. And there is a natural tension because there was a time not so long ago where there were some in politics that were saying, the only way for Republicans to win is to become more like Democrats. Well, we already have a Democratic Party in America. Why do you need two of them? In essence, if you believe in the stimulus package, if you believe in cap and trade, if you believe in these things and you think that we should do them, well, then people are going to vote for Democrats. Why do we need two political parties that agree on those principles, particularly when there are legitimate differences of opinion on it? It is that, I think, an extraordinary number of Americans, and in my opinion, a majority of Americans, that disagree with those policies, who deserve a voice in American politics. And the key to success for the Republicans is to be that alternative.
In the last election, though, why did the Democrats overwhelmingly dominate?
Two reasons. First of all, Republicans had the majority for 6 years in Washington, didn't implement the contract with America, in essence, didn't govern on what they campaigned on, and that makes Republicans vulnerable. When you govern, when you run as one thing and then govern as something different, you're going to pay a price at the ballot box because the lack of genuineness and the inability to follow through, that accountability is going to come to reflection on Election Day. Let's also not forget, that Barack Obama is really where they succeeded because at other levels there wasn't success. For example, here in Florida, they made no gains in the legislature. Barack Obama is a superior communicator, raised more money than any candidate in history, had the support of all sorts of cultural icons, and not to mention the historic nature of his candidacy. I think, quite frankly, it's amazing that John McCain, faced with all of that, was able to get 48% of the vote.
Interesting. Does the Republican Party as a whole have to find a star like a Barack Obama?
No.
Because things have changed with the media.
No, I don't believe in political messiahs. I think the Republican Party needs to find people that will run for office, go to Washington, D.C., and do what they campaign on. and campaign on a core set of principles, even if some people may disagree with you. If you get elected, go to Washington, D.C. and act on those principles and then be held accountable every 2 or 6 years, depending on what you got elected to. That's what the Republican Party needs, is people that will do that. This sort of personality-driven politics is just not in the political DNA of Americans. I mean, that's something you see across the rest of the world. In America, we know all people are flawed, so we don't put our faith in individuals. We put our faith in our republic and in our collective wisdom as a society and in our lives. Quite frankly, most Americans don't want to do very much with government. I mean, they don't want government raising their kids, running their business. They want government. We're not anarchists. I mean, there's an important role for government. Government should be building roads and securing the public safety and putting bad people in jail and protecting our borders and defending our nation from terrorist threats and foreign adversaries. That's an important role for having a safety net. We believe in a safety net, and that's a proper role of government. But most Americans don't want government involved in deciding the direction of their lives. And so I think they're looking for voices that are going to go to Washington and stand up for that.
Let's talk about the stimulus package for just a second. And I know as generally you were against that. What about the argument that the economy was on the verge of a collapse and we needed it? Do you buy that?
I don't. In fact, it hasn't helped in that regard. That's not, the stimulus package was passed on one premise. They can make up other premises now, in hindsight, that it's a failure, but it was passed on one premise. In fact, it was the premise on which Charlie Crist supported it, and that is jobs, that it was going to create jobs in Florida and across the country. It has failed to do that. Unemployment rate in Florida today is as high as it has been in 30 some odd years. It has not created jobs in Florida. And there's 2 reasons why the stimulus was a bad idea. Number one, it's because we can't afford it. I mean, this is not money we just paid in our taxes. That money was spent a long time ago. This was borrowed money, and this was printed money. And so that's the first thing that was wrong with the stimulus. The second thing is that it was based on a flawed premise. This idea that by somehow spending money through government, we were going to go out and create these permanent jobs that would lead to economic growth. Look, if the stimulus is about building roads and infrastructure, then just say this is an infrastructure program. But don't say it's going to create permanent jobs, because it's not going to. The only lasting legacy that this stimulus will leave is close to $800 billion in deficits.
With the economy being in the shape it was in, what, in your opinion, what should have been done?
First of all, I think meaningful tax reform. And let me give you an example of a couple things that could have been done. Number one is stop all of this uncertainty that's coming out of government. One of the reasons why jobs are not being created in America today is because the people who create jobs, and no, let me break it to you, it's not the president, it's not the U.S. Senate, it's not the United States House. The people that create jobs in America are entrepreneurs, small business risk takers. Those are the people that create jobs in America. They're not expanding their existing business. They're not hiring new people. They're not opening up new businesses because they're uncertain about what the rules are going to be going forward in the future. In essence, what are the rules going to be? They hear all this talk about a healthcare mandate. They hear all this talk about a climate change mandate. They hear all this talk about the Bush taxes expiring next year. They hear all this talk about all these new government expansions and new taxes we're going to need to pay for that stuff. And they don't know what the rules are going to be. So until they know what the rules are going to be going forward, they are not going to risk their hard-earned money expanding their business and hiring new people. So the first thing I would have said is provide stability. Basically just stop at the federal level and provide a level of policy stability so that the decision makers, the people that create jobs, will have the comfort of knowing that they can go out and use their money to expand their business and hire new people, and that things aren't going to go awry. There's other things that could have been done. For example, meaningful tax reform. I think it was a perfect opportunity to look at our tax code and say this has to be simplified, and we have to take the tax implications out of the business decisions. We have taxes in America for one simple reason, and that is that we need government to some level, and government has to be funded. And the reason to have taxes, and the only reason to have taxes, is to fund government. Unfortunately, in Washington, taxes are used as an economic tool. They use it to pick winners and losers. They use it to encourage or discourage certain behavior. They use it to reward or punish certain industries. And I don't think that's the purpose of the tax code. And so in America, at this very moment, there are people sitting around deciding on whether to open up a new business or not, or whether to expand an existing business or not. And it's the tax implications that they're talking about, not the profit implications or the growth implications. We've got to take that out through tax simplification.
And how do we do that?
Well, I think the ideal is the fair tax. I've always supported a consumption-based tax. I think that the bill that's out there needs a little bit of work, and I believe there's some significant political impediments to it. But ideally, I believe the fair tax is the ideal plan, given enough time to develop it and implement it. But that being said, let me just say there are political consequences. I mean, there's sticker shock associated with that. And so that's why I believe that at a minimum, and I mean in the short term at a minimum, We need dramatic tax simplifications where people can pay their taxes on a flat rate and fill it out on the back of a postcard.
Of course, the argument with that comes down to if we have some sort of flat rate tax structure, it's going to hurt the lower class. Do you buy that?
Well, it depends on what you set the flat rate at, and you still have standard exemptions. I mean, you're still going to have the standard family exemption. There will come a point in that tax where some people aren't going to pay anything because they're below the poverty level or don't make enough money. So the answer is no. The second thing is not having jobs being created in America, and which is the consequences of taxes are that. One of the consequences of a complicated and convoluted tax code is that jobs are not being created. The fact that jobs are not being created in America makes it very difficult for the working class, because the working class works. They need jobs, and jobs are not being created. And I think that the complexity of our tax code is hurting them more than anybody else.
Let's take the tax code out of it for just a second as far as creating jobs and also talking about education. I think it was Paul Volcker who I heard say that basically what this country needs is more mechanical engineers, more electrical engineers, and fewer financial engineers. Do we need to some way start getting our workforce trained to be more technically experts?
Yeah,
Technical experts?
well, I think we need to make sure that we are training a workforce that reflects the needs of the new 21st century economy, that America is producing enough workforce to meet the demands of the 21st century, because we're going to be competing in a much different environment. I always tell people, you know, my oldest child is 9. I have a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old. All 4 of my kids. The jobs they're probably going to have aren't even invented yet. Mm-hmm. That's how much the economy, I believe, will continue to change over the next few years. So certainly, it's one of the reasons why one of the things I think the president has done well is because he is hire an innovator to head up the Department of Education. And through that, they've created an innovation fund where they're going across the country, and they are encouraging states, which is where innovation in education should happen, to be innovative. And one of the great innovations in American education policy is the development of curriculums that reflect the 21st century. We actually did some of that here in Florida, pursuant to 100 Ideas, which was a book that we wrote prior to my taking over as speaker. And I'm glad to see that some of that's happening across the country. And so I think that's been a success, and it's important to talk about successes when they're happening.
Tell me about the book, 100 Ideas for Florida.
Well, it was put together after about a year of traveling the state and listening to people through what we called idea raisers. We raised ideas from folks. We asked them what they would do if they were in our position. We had a lot of ideas. We tried to condense it down to about 100. And we passed all 100 out of the Florida House, and 57 of them became law. In essence, the House, the Senate, and the governor signed off on it. So really the important thing about 100 Ideas is not how many you passed or didn't pass. It's not a scorecard. It's number one, that the process was about ideas. In essence, that it was dominated by a public policy debate, not about a debate over who was a worse person. People disagree on politics today, and they just skip the whole policy debate and go right to trying to convince everybody that the other person is morally deficient. I think that's a sad part of our politics, and I think it's keeping us from solving major problems. So I think the first thing that I like about 100 Ideas is that it forced the focus to be on public policy. The second thing is that it reflected the real lives of real people. In essence, you want your political process to reflect what's being talked about over the kitchen table all across your state and all across your country. And often there's an enormous disconnect. You see it now with this whole economic debate. You open the Wall Street Journal, which I read, or you listen to these financial channels, and they all talk about the Dow Jones and the consumer spending numbers and all that. And you hear this talk about, well, maybe the recession's over, maybe it's flattening out. Well, maybe it is on Wall Street. But in the rest of America, it's still difficult to find a job, and it's still difficult to open a business. And in my mind, those two are the leading economic indicators. How hard is it to start a business? How hard is it to find a job? The harder it is to do either one of those two things, the worse off you are economically.
Let's talk healthcare for a second. Obviously, that's what's in the news right now. Do we need healthcare insurance reform?
Well, we need to have a conversation about healthcare in America, and particularly health insurance. You have 30 some odd million Americans, and there's a debate, but I count American citizens legally in this country who are without health insurance. And they are without health insurance for a lot of different reasons. Some are without health insurance because they're young and they're healthy and they don't think they need it. And quite frankly, they'd rather have the money in their pocket. Some don't have it because their job doesn't offer it. Some don't have it because they're a small businessman or businesswoman and they can't afford to buy it. Some don't have it because they're unemployed. There are a lot of different reasons why people are uninsured. We all agree that something should be done to make insurance more available to that demographic of Americans. It raises the cost of healthcare on all of us. The question is, how do you solve it? And the answer I'm hearing increasingly from Washington is the federal government should go out and open an insurance company called the public option. I think that's a bad idea for a number of different reasons. Number one, all public health insurance plans do not pay as much as the private plans do. So right away it tells you that that's going to shift the cost. In essence, if hospitals are losing money on Medicare, Medicaid, and public option patients, they're going to try to make up that money on their private pay patients, which is going to drive up the cost of health care for the vast majority of Americans. The second thing is that government's not a fair competitor. A public option is going to be subsidized because it's run by politicians. And politicians are going to want that public option to offer more coverage at less costs. And the only way to do that is by subsidizing it, which means we're going to have to spend taxpayer money to subsidize it at a time when our country doesn't have any money to spare. The third thing that worries me is that the cost projections are always off. Every single medical insurance plan in American history, whether it was Medicare, Medicaid, has always been off the mark. In essence, whatever the Congressional Budget Office calculated the cost would be, it's always been 5 to 10 times that. And so we need to be concerned that at a time when America is threatened by really dangerous deficits, that we're going to add a new component to that deficit spending. The alternative, I think, is a vibrant private market where people can go out and buy the coverage they need at a price they can afford. What does that mean? Let me give you a real world example. I am a father of 4 in a family of 6. I need comprehensive health care coverage. That means I have to pay more every month, but that's what I require. On the other hand, my brother-in-law is 25 years old. He never gets sick, and he thinks he's never going to die. He's not going to pay $600 or $400 a month for health insurance. He's just not going to do it. On the other hand, I think if it was reasonably priced, we could convince him to buy a plan that has primary care and what I call hit by a bus care, which is catastrophic hospitalization. I think that that's something that we should. So what we want is a vibrant private market where people can buy different types of health insurance plans, and you can do that by dealing with mandates and allowing people to buy across state lines. So buy the health coverage you need at a price you can afford, which a competitive market will offer you. And third, and I think very important, the ability to buy your health insurance independent of your employer. In essence, that you can go out and buy health insurance the way you buy auto insurance or life insurance, straight from a company or an agent, don't have to go through your job. If your job wants to offer it, that's great. But I believe in the law of demand and supply. There's a demand for this type of coverage out there, but it's government and its restrictions and its mandates that are keeping it from being supplied.
But how do you keep the insurance companies from being in a situation where they, single out the folks with certain pre-existing conditions and things like that?
That's a problem, and I think that's why we need to have, and I don't know the economics of it, and I take public policy very seriously, so I'm not here today to break out a new idea, but I would say that maybe there needs to be a conversation about a high-risk pool in America, where you do take the sickest and most difficult to insure folks and insure them. And if you did that and then left the rest to the private market, then I think you'll really see a healthy competition. I also think that there should be a conversation about pre-existing conditions and the ability of insurance companies to knock you off. Look, that's a contract. My contract with my health insurance company is a contract, and they should have to live up to and abide by it. And so that should be enforced. My first bill, one of my first bills in the Florida legislature, was a bill that made it more difficult for insurance companies to deny coverage. My mom went to have an open heart surgery performed, and the insurance company didn't want to do it. They said it wasn't medically necessary. One of the first bills I was involved in passing in the legislature was a bill that required that when an insurance company in Florida makes a medical decision like that, an adverse determination, that it has to be signed off on by a licensed doctor in Florida who says this is not medically necessary, so that their license is on the line. Because up to that point, decisions like that were being made by an accountant or some bureaucrat somewhere. So I'm not a defender of the industry, and I think the best thing you could do to bring fairness to health insurance is to provide competition, because companies know that if they abuse their clients are going to go to somebody else.
You mentioned a few minutes ago illegal aliens, immigration. Let's talk about immigration. How do we solve that problem in this country?
Well, first let's define what it is. And the problem we have in America is, and I always tell this to Republicans, we are not the anti-illegal immigration party. We are the pro-legal immigration party. And the problem we have in America is that our legal immigration system is broken. I always joke that if you can throw a 98-mile-per-hour fastball, or if you're 7'2" and can dunk a basketball, you have no problems coming in and out of this country. But if on the other hand you can cure cancer, it's much more difficult. You may never get here. So our legal immigration system is broken. We don't have a guest worker program that works. I mean, why don't we have a guest worker program where if in fact there are jobs that no one in America will do? Why can't we create a program where people can apply in their home country, receive a tamper-proof card to enter this country from a limited period of time, do the work, and when that work is done, go back to their home country until the next time we need them? Why don't we have that? Well, we need that, and that's the kind of reform we should be talking about. The problem is the American people have no trust in the federal government, and they're not going to have a trust in the federal government until the federal government deals with the issue of illegal immigration, until the federal government gives people confidence that the law is being enforced, that the border is being secured, that our visa process is no longer being abused. And so I think step one is to enforce our existing laws, secure our borders, fix our visa entry problem. Because people don't know this, but a significant percentage of the illegal aliens in America entered legally through a visa. The visa expired and they stayed. So we got to fix the visa problem, got to fix the border, deal with the illegal immigration problem first. When the American people have confidence that the federal government has done that, then we can move to step two. And step two is create a legal immigration system that works, that once again is a positive for America. You cannot grant amnesty. If you grant amnesty, you will send a message that all you have to do is come into America illegally, stay here long enough, and we will let you stay. Number two, you will destroy any hopes you have of having a legal immigration system that works. If the American people see us grant amnesty, they will never again believe in legal immigration. They will never again support it. And that's wrong for our country, bad for our future. In fact, in '86, when Reagan created an amnesty program, about 3 million people were granted amnesty. The result was that you had a bunch of people standing in line to enter legally who all claimed to be illegal, because it was easier to get through the amnesty program. So we can't have amnesty. And I think if you have a guest worker program in place that functions, the illegal folks that are here now will go back home through attrition.
There are a lot of people out there who say if we do not have some sort of process to make immigration easier, that we are going to have a real problem because the demographics are not lining up in such a way to support the country moving forward. In other words, mine and your generation, there aren't enough kids to support the baby boomers with Social Security, Medicare, et cetera.
Well, again, that's what you have a legal immigration process for. That's why it's so important to have a legal immigration process that works. But we have to know, it has to be in a controlled fashion. It can't just be come on in, right, you know, and whoever you are. I mean, we've got to know who you are, where you're coming, you know, why you're here. You know, there's got to be a controlled process for the entry of people into this country. And that's all we're advocating. That's why I say we are the pro-legal immigration movement. We believe that legal immigration is something that's positive and necessary for America, but it has to be in a setting that respects the rule of law.
Let's talk international geopolitical. We have our hands full. Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. Your thoughts?
They're all interrelated. You know, the real issue in Afghanistan is how do you deal with terrorism? Our goal there is, number one, to ensure the Taliban does not reestablish a foothold in the region, because they were very hospitable to al-Qaeda. But really our top priority is al-Qaeda. And al-Qaeda right now, and the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, is basically concentrated in the mountainous regions between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that's the ultimate goal. And so all this debate should be framed by that. There are two things that are essential. In order for us to find out where these Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders are, we need folks on the ground that will work with us. And those folks are people in the Pakistani government and tribal leaders in the Afghan region, in addition to a stable Afghan government. We need the cooperation of people on the ground. That's why I laugh at all this conversation about remote control, you know, attacks on the Taliban. You need to know where they are before you can do that. And by the way, where are you going to launch these from? Since, you know, these things have a 400-mile range. I mean, you got to launch them from some ground-based area. If the United States pulls out of that region, or if in any way the United States gives the signal that we are not truly committed to the region, we will not get the cooperation of the tribal leaders in that area. We will not have a stable and secure Afghan government. We will not have willing allies in Pakistan. If they think that we are fair weather friends, if they think that we are not truly committed to the long haul of what it takes, both from a commitment of time and money, to winning the war against terrorism, they will not be our allies. If they think that at any point in time we will be pulling back from our obligations, it will be difficult, almost impossible, to get them to cooperate with us, and we won't win this battle that we have. And it's an important one. We must win the war on terror. We must win the global war on terror. Number two, if America retracts from its position in that region, or in any way gives the indication that we're not really committed to it, or we're only willing to go so far, well, you know, Taliban and the al-Qaeda has time on their side. They'll wait us out for 20, 15, 10 years. They have no problem if they know that. And so do our allies. In essence, if you think if you think it's hard enough to get our allies to work with us now on the global war, imagine when America becomes an unreliable partner in that endeavor. If America won't lead this, no one else is going to do it. So it's all interrelated, and it's important that we deal with that. Iran is a separate issue. America needs to be very wary of what's happening there. I hope we can have a negotiated settlement. Look, war is not good. No one wants it. And I don't think that that should be our first choice. I hope that indeed they can strike a deal and that Iran does begin to ship all kinds of uranium to other countries to process. I hope they shut down their nuclear program, and that way we have these extraordinary negotiators that can get them to do that. But I think what they're doing is just buying time, because Iran's ultimate goal is to become a regional and somewhat global power. They want to be the predominant power in the Middle East, and they believe that the acquisition of a nuclear weapon capacity allows them to do that. And the implications of that, quite frankly, are untenable and unacceptable.
We're getting a little bit short on time, but climate change, is that a real concern, or is it being a political football?
You know, it doesn't matter. I mean, people talk to me about, I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to give scientific opinions other than to tell you, I do believe, however, that you know, we should not allow environmental concerns to destroy our economy, and we shouldn't allow our economic concerns to destroy our environment. I believe there's a balance there, and there has to be a proper balance with both of them. That being said, there's an extraordinary consensus in America, whether it's from the climate change perspective or the national security perspective. There is an enormous consensus in America, an extraordinary consensus, that we want to become energy independent. And that means we want to stop using so many fossil fuels in the long term. And so the debate is, how do we accomplish that? Some people believe the way you accomplish that is through big government mandates like a cap and trade system. That's what they want. I disagree. I think cap and trade will make America the cleanest third world economy on the planet. What I want instead is for us to do it through innovation. I believe the American innovator, the American inventor, the American entrepreneur will in fact create these new sources of energy and will create energy efficiency technologies. In fact, I hope Florida becomes the Silicon Valley of that industry. I think it's an enormous promising industry for American future. Talk about creating jobs and wealth in America. That industry could help us do that. But you have to incentivize it, and you have to give it time. And I believe in it because I know you can make money doing it. And Americans have proven that if you can make money doing something, we'll do it better than anybody else in the world. And so that's the direction I hope we will go. In the interim, however, we have to have energy security. And that's why I think it's important that offshore drilling be part of our options. I believe America has to have access to all of our energy resources, because in the short term, as we move towards this energy independent era in our history, when we no longer use fossil fuels at some point in our lifetime, in the interim, America needs to make sure that it has a sufficient supply of energy to secure our economy and our nation.
In 30 seconds, tell me, what makes Marco Rubio tick? What's the passion?
I think the passion is that America is the greatest society in human history. I believe that we are great because of our limited government has made us more prosperous than anyone in the history of humanity. I think that limited government is under attack in Washington, and we need to send people to Washington, D.C. that will stand up to that and in fact offer an alternative. And I'm running for U.S. Senate because I don't think there's anybody else in this race that you can count on to go to Washington and fight against this agenda and in fact offer an alternative to it.
One final question, and then I'll allow for a quick answer on this, and
Yeah.
I'm catching you a little bit off guard on this one, and it's a difficult one. But when do the Miami Dolphins turn the season around?
When their schedule gets easier. They've played the best teams in football, probably lost to the two teams that are going to wind up in the Super Bowl. So,
Marco Rubio, it has been an absolute pleasure.
thank you.
I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Marco Rubio, he is running for United States Senate, and we certainly appreciate him spending some time with us. By the way, you can catch us on the web at WSRE.org/conversations, and there's also a link to Facebook. We'd certainly love to have your input. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. Take good care of yourself, and we'll see you next time on Conversations.